This is one of those stories that just sounds made up. It's about ambition, it's about failure, and it's about the incredible drive that took one man from babysitting his boss's kid to building a global automotive empire. This is the story of Soichiro Honda. I mean, just look at this contrast. It's almost unbelievable, right? On one side, you've got a teenager in a new city whose first job is literally looking after a baby in 1922. And then you fast forward a few decades, and he's an industrial titan. So how in the world do you get from A to B? Well, that journey started in a tiny village with a single powerful spark. All right, let's rewind. We're going all the way back to the beginning, a small, pretty poor village right at the foot of Mount Fuji. This is where one moment, just one little spark, would ignite a passion that would last a lifetime. Can you just imagine being 8 years old and hearing this strange new rumbling sound? You see a car for the very first time in your life, and you're so mesmerized, you just take off, sprinting after it. He said he couldn't wrap his head around how it moved on its own. That one moment, it basically set the entire course for the rest of his life. Now, what's really interesting here is that Honda was not what you'd call a good student. In fact, he kind of hated traditional school. He would much rather get his hands dirty in his father's bicycle repair shop. He even admitted to forging his family's stamp on his grade reports so he wouldn't have to show his parents. So yeah, when he saw an ad for a job at an auto shop in Tokyo at age 15, he knew that was his ticket out. He dropped out and just went for it. So there he is. He arrives in Tokyo, totally ready to work on engines and live his dream. But his apprenticeship didn't exactly start the way he thought it would. This chapter is all about him having to prove himself, when, believe me, the odds were stacked against him. He starts at the absolute bottom. I'm talking cleaning floors and, yes, babysitting. But when the shop got overwhelmed with work, he finally got his shot. And he didn't just learn, he completely excelled. Just 1 year later, he's helping build a race car out of an old airplane engine. By the time he's 17, he's the right-hand engineer on a championship-winning car. His talent was so obvious that by 21, his boss literally trusted him to run an entire new branch of the company. I mean, what a meteoric rise. You see, Honda wasn't just a mechanic. He was a seriously talented and fearless race car driver. But in 1936, a horrific crash nearly killed him. We're talking a fractured arm, dislocated shoulder, a totally smashed up face. His family basically begged him to quit racing, and he did. But this end was actually a new beginning. He decided that if he couldn't drive the fastest cars, well, he was going to build them. So this brings us to his first real shot at being a manufacturer. And this part of the story is absolutely crucial, because this is where he was forged in the fires of failure. It's where he developed that core philosophy that success is really just built on a pile of mistakes. He starts his own company, Tokai Seiki, to make piston rings. And his ambition was massive, but so was the workload. He was still running his repair shop all day, and then he'd spend the entire night in the lab trying to perfect his designs. The stress was unreal. He lost so much weight that people said his face looked gaunt and skeletal. And after all that sacrifice, he finally lands a huge contract with Toyota. He submits his very first batch of 50 piston rings. So what was the result? Only 3 passed inspection. 3 out of 50. Can you even imagine that crushing disappointment? All that work for a 94% failure rate? But what he did next, this is what separates the greats from everyone else. Instead of giving up, he humbled himself. The same high school dropout who hated the classroom so much he forged his report cards, he went back to school. He enrolled in a technical institute to learn metallurgy because he knew he had a knowledge gap, and he was determined to fill it by learning directly from his failure. So just as he finally perfected his piston rings and his company was starting to thrive, forces completely outside of his control came along and threatened to wipe him off the map. This part of the story is about rising from the absolute ruins, about just unbelievable resilience. First, there's this. In 1944, right in the middle of World War II, his factory is hit by a direct bomb blast, a totally devastating blow. And then, as if that wasn't enough, just a few months later, in January of 1945, the Nankai earthquake hits the region, and what was left of his other plant completely collapses. Everything he had built was quite literally in ruins. After the war, Honda sold what little was left of his company to Toyota. Japan was devastated. There was a severe shortage of gasoline. For almost anyone else, this would be a crippling, game-over problem. But for Soichiro Honda, it was an opportunity that sparked one simple question. And his answer was it was brilliant in its simplicity. He found a surplus of little two-stroke engines that were used for military radios, and he had an idea. What if you just strapped one of these onto a regular bicycle? So he founded the Honda Technical Research Institute in some old warehouse and just started building these motorized bikes. They were an instant hit. It was exactly what the country needed: cheap, simple transportation. And that simple, brilliant idea, that was the tiny seed that would eventually grow into a global engine of commerce. It's how a little workshop in a shed grew into the Honda Motor Company that we all know today. Okay, so to expand, he needed money. So what did he do? He wrote this passionate letter to 18,000 bicycle shops all across Japan, basically telling them he had the solution to get the country moving again. And you know what? 3,000 of them believed him and sent him money. With that funding, he launched the Model D. And later, the revolutionary Super Cub, this friendly, easy-to-ride little bike that just took over the entire world. The results were just staggering. In a little over a decade, thanks to the Super Cub and a string of racing wins that put the Honda name on the map, his company became the world's #1 motorcycle manufacturer. But for Honda, that wasn't enough. He was still thinking about that Ford Model T from his childhood. You know, when Honda first decided to get into the car market, a lot of people thought he was crazy. But then the 1970s hit, and with it, the oil crisis and new worries about pollution. And Honda didn't just release a car, he released a solution. The Honda Civic had this revolutionary engine called the CVCC that was incredibly fuel efficient, it tackled pollution head-on, and on top of all that, it was reliable and affordable. It was, without a doubt, the perfect car for that moment. The success of the Civic and later the Accord, it just fueled this astronomical climb. Think about this. In the early 80s, Honda was the third largest car maker in Japan. By the end of that same decade, it was the third largest on the entire planet. That is an absolutely stunning achievement. Soichiro Honda retired in 1973, leaving behind a global powerhouse. But his most enduring legacy? It isn't a car, it's not a motorcycle. It's a powerful philosophy about the very nature of success itself. He actually said it himself. He looked back at his entire career and said he saw it as just a series of mistakes and blunders. But here's the key part of that quote. My mistakes and failures never occurred for the same reasons. You see, every failure was a lesson. Every setback was a new piece of data. Success wasn't the opposite of failure. For him, it was the result of. And that really leaves us with a powerful thought. Soichiro Honda's story teaches us that the path forward is often paved with things that go wrong. The question really isn't if you'll fail, but what you'll learn when you do. So think about it. What failure will spark your next success?